Let's say you got a promotion, but you always had second thoughts that perhaps you didn't deserve this promotion. Or maybe as a student, you scored very well, but you thought that you did so because luck was perhaps in your favor. And as a new parent, you always have self doubts that maybe you're not good enough. If the answer is yes to all these, then this episode is for you. We are discussing imposter syndrome today with our guest. Hi everyone, I'm Nazneen Kachwala and I welcome you to this new episode of Hashtag's Human Library podcast, the Mental Health series. Our guest today is Mr. Chandra Duraiswamy, who is a dynamic communications and marketing leader with 25 years of experience driving brand transformation through inclusive storytelling, strategic campaigns, and digital innovation. He is passionate advocate of diversity, equity and inclusion with a proven track record of engaging global audiences and fostering meaningful change. I hope you enjoy this episode and you watch it till the end and share it with all those who you think might find this useful. Hello, sir. Welcome to Hashtag's Winged Fables Mental Health podcast. And I'm so delighted to have you. And thank you for your time to discuss this topic.
Thank you, Nazneen. Thank you for this opportunity. Even as soon as you shared the topic with me, I was reflecting on various examples at various phases in my life where I have felt like an imposter. And I'm still walking into this conversation today with little bit of that lingering feeling. Can I convey whatever I want to convey? Am I as good as what she thinks? So all of that still lingers in the back of my mind. But then I will use this opportunity to share those and how I've overcome this in my
Yeah,
career.
sure, sir. So, sir, to begin with, the first thing, what is an imposter syndrome? If you can just break it down in simple terms for our audience, and who does it affect? How does it show up in people's life? And why does it happen to people?
Great question. See, imposter syndrome is an internal experience of believing that you're not competent enough as what others think of you,
Hmm.
despite your accomplishments. I may have accomplished, I may have got multiple degrees, but then I still feel I'm not good enough. Maybe I could have done better. I don't measure up to my own standards, leave alone measuring up to somebody else's standards. Our own either standards are quite high or constantly comparing ourselves with others and thinking, oh, this is not enough. I don't think I can do well. There's constant fear of failure, so on and so forth.
Hmm.
Maya Angelou, who was an accomplished poet, author, she
Hmm.
was also a civil rights activist in the US. After her 11th book, once said, even after writing 11 books, I still feel they're going to find out this time.
Hmm.
Despite being such an accomplished person, right,
Yeah.
in her own walk of life, she's won over 50 awards, she's received over 50 honorary degrees, but still she had this feeling. The Journal of Behavior Science estimates 70% of people will experience imposter syndrome at some point of time in their life. For some,
Hmm.
it could just be once. For many of us, it could be multiple times where we feel we're not good enough.
Yeah.
Imposter syndrome is not just for people who've not accomplished, even for high achievers. They could go through the feeling that, hey, I'm not good enough. There's constantly pressure that the society puts in terms of, and the expectations as well. So as a result, people start feeling like imposter. I'm not good enough.
Hmm.
People constantly expect more from you. Now, coming
Hmm.
back to the sub question, where does imposter syndrome arise from, right? There could be various points where it can arise from. One, lack of privilege. For example,
Okay.
we talked about Maya Angelou, right? She's an American, she's an African American. End of the day, she was a civil rights activist. She fought for the rights of not just women, but also for African Americans in the US. So she comes from a lesser privileged background. So the
Okay.
entire society, when you come from a lesser privileged background, there's a constant need for you to overdo to prove yourself. And we compare ourselves. There are so many spaces where at some point time in the US, the blacks weren't allowed. I call them the blacks. The African Americans weren't allowed. They were segregated. So the people always were made to feel inferior. Similarly, in India, we still have a struggle with Dalit equality in the country. They're not allowed in so many places of worship and education as well. So there's still a lot of that feeling of inferiority. So lack of privilege is one of the reasons that propels imposter syndrome. Something as simple as bullying in the school, right? We've all had a teacher or a classmate bully us. For example, when you go ask people who've gone to the commerce section, they will tell you, I wasn't really good at math, I wasn't good at science. Sometimes I tend to ask them, why do you think you weren't good at math or science? Probably it'll eventually come down to one instance or a few instances where a teacher or a classmate, somebody said something that just put down, that just put them down the path of no confidence. They completely, the confidence was wiped away. And they said, you know what, I'm really not good at this, so I'm just going to move on.
Yeah.
And they start to believe internally that they're not good enough, despite being good enough, and they just walk away from that stream. Low confidence. Sometimes the comparison that people make, they probably say, oh, this person's a genius. And they say you're so, but they don't understand that every time you're being looked at as a genius or a prodigy, there's so much pressure on you to perform. You'll have to measure up. Many a times, hard work is often taught as failure for these kind of people. Eventually, one of the other reasons is lack of exposure. I'm going to share one example in the next segment somewhere in our conversation today, where when people don't have exposure to either a culture or a particular language, when they move out of the country, so on and so forth, right? They always feel inadequate or incomplete in many ways because the world wants you to look all of you as apples, not as oranges. You don't want to stand out and you don't want to be a sore
Yeah.
thumb.
Yeah.
So all of these put people down the path of imposter syndrome. How does imposter syndrome show up in our life, right? How does it show up and where can we spot it? When we go out, when we go to attend an interview, for example, right, we may have written down whatever we did on our resume. But then there's that self-doubt in us that says, what if they ask something more? What if I draw blank? What if they think that I am a fraud? That these were all cooked up examples or cooked up achievements that I put up on my resume. Everybody,
Yeah.
all of us feel when we sit for an interview, right? And many a times, right, uh, in Asian cultures, for example, we don't celebrate our achievements that much. Even if there's an achievement in life, we say, oh, there are many more steps to go. Why should I prematurely celebrate this? There's a long way. Life is not just this one success. There are going to be many more. There are going to be failures as well. So we just attribute it to either luck or probably timing than saying, oh, yes, I did the hard work. Thank you. I appreciate. This is a feedback that was given to me a few times at the workplace where people say, you've won this award. And I'm like, okay, so what? And sometimes I would not even celebrate, and people like, it's time for celebration. Why don't you celebrate? And sometimes I would ask myself, oh, the person who gave me the award, who chose me for this award? Maybe if not for this person, would I have won the award? So those are the questions that
Yeah.
those are the questions that I have to answer. So, and sometimes I may have felt inadequate in some ways to make my presence felt. I may be overworking to prove my worth. And that can also be so draining because maybe somebody comes from a non privileged background. So for them to be accepted in that crowd, they may have to outperform themselves every time. They may have to
Mm.
go above and beyond everybody else in the room for them to get invited to the table for a conversation.
True. Mm.
And last but not the least is avoiding new opportunities.
Mm.
Sometimes you're saying, oh, I don't think I'm good enough for this. I don't want to try. I don't want to take on new challenges or opportunity because there's this fear of failure. The fear of
Mm.
failure is not because you're inadequate. It is just from the imposter syndrome. And many
Mm.
times we forget to look at the rear view mirror to see the achievements and the accomplishments that have come our way.
Mm. Yeah. Um, so you just mentioned about your colleagues sometimes celebrating your achievements, but you doubting yourself that, oh, if it would have not been this person, would I even receive this award? But sometimes it's also the opposite. I'm not just directing the question maybe uh, from in a different direction from the subject, but sometimes it's also the other way. Then again, it creates like a cycle of self-doubt, and then again, the next time when you achieve, you again feel like a fraudster. So, what is the right approach to address this?
See, there's no, I mean, whatever has worked for me, I can share with you rather than saying this is right, this is wrong. Every
Mm.
time I'm right, I'm sitting in my room where I have all my degrees and my achievements on the wall. Because every time I have to handle that feeling, maybe this won't work out, maybe I'm not good enough. I would just stare at all my achievements for a minute. And I'm
Mm.
like, how did I even achieve this? How was it even possible? There may be a fleeting thought that, oh, I could fail, or maybe I won't be good enough for this opportunity. But then I would look at it, I'm like, okay, I can go ahead and start my hard work today. Let me sit down and
Yeah.
prepare. For
Mm.
example, for this podcast as well, right? So I sat down and prepared, I made my notes, and I said, these are the examples that I'd like to share. And this is how I
Mm.
broke them down into smaller pieces so that I could share my experience with others and tell them they're not alone in this journey.
Yeah. True. Right, sir. So then how is it different from just being simply humble or, just being self-aware? How is imposter syndrome different from these two? And as you said, there is clear success, but still people feel like fraudsters. So what is the difference? How would you address this?
Being humble and self-aware, you're probably aware of your achievements. When you're self-aware, right, you know what you've accomplished, you know what your strengths
Mm.
and limitations are. When you're
Yeah.
humble as well, you know that. But when you suffer from imposter syndrome, you don't even recognize your own achievements. And that is one of the reasons I have this wall of achievements in front of me to constantly remind me that I am good enough. I
Okay.
used to work for GE before, and then GE Healthcare had this hall of fame that they had created at the
Mm.
workplace, where any employee who had filed patents for the organization was their names were there, their pictures were
Mm.
there on the wall.
Mm.
And it was such a
Mm.
proud moment when they or any of their colleagues walked into that office. It
Mm.
constantly reminds them that I need to achieve. It is not that something is unachievable, but through hard work and diligence, all of that is absolutely achievable. So, humility
Yeah.
is when you know and you acknowledge your strengths and your limitations. And imposter syndrome is when you don't even recognize them. You just wear blinders and keep saying, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough. And you keep going down that path.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
You feel unworthy and you feel that you may be exposed and you don't want to take on
Yeah.
new challenges. You fear failure. All of that
Yeah.
happens when you have imposter syndrome. Even high
Yeah.
achievers struggle. It is not just people who have very less confidence or who come from underprivileged backgrounds. Even people from privileged backgrounds
Mm.
struggle, right? Uh, Sometimes they set unreasonably very high standards for themselves. Sometimes people around them also set unreasonably high standards for themselves. For example, if a celebrity's child decide to take on the same profession, for example, in Bollywood, we've seen, right? There's a constant comparison between either the parent and the child, or their siblings, etc., the people start doubting their own capabilities at the end of it. They're
Hmm.
unable to come out of that shell, break that shell and come out and say, yes, I can do it.
Hmm.
Sometimes the more success that people get, they find the pressure even more. Like what Maya Angelou said,
Yeah.
right? At the end of 11th book, she says, I am, this is, I've written 11 books, but each time I think, oh, this time they're going to find out. When
Yeah.
she says this time they're going to find out, she only means that this time they're going to find out that I don't know anything.
Hmm.
So, like the statistics, 70% of us go through this feeling at some point. For a lot of us, it lingers a lot longer based on the point of privilege that we come from, the
Hmm.
upbringing, the experiences that we've gone through. It's quite easy to navigate and to come out of it.
Hmm. Yeah. So, what has been your story with imposter syndrome? Like, as you said that you've also experienced it. So, I would want to know that what triggered it and how did you navigate through this? What was your process? You mentioned about the Hall of Fame as one thing, but then I would want to know the entire thing, how it started and how you went about it.
Okay, so now let's go on a trip to 1997 when I boarded the flight with 30 of my other classmates for my master's to the US.
Hmm.
So most of us were Indians, but then we all went into different, although we traveled together, we all went into different universities.
Okay.
And then at some point, I felt a little less confident and inadequate because I did not speak English the
Okay.
same way Americans spoke. The accent,
Okay.
the slang,
Hmm.
the twang that came with the words, I
Yeah.
did not. So the moment I
Hmm.
landed there, I found myself little underprepared, if I would say, more than
Okay.
inadequate. Say
Okay.
underprepared.
Hmm.
Because those were the days when we had to apply to colleges through a dial-up connection of a BSNL. We did not have high-speed
Okay.
internets. We had to use our telephone lines to do that. So for
Okay.
us to even listen to 15 minutes of CNN wasn't available for us. Though television
Hmm.
was there, but then we hadn't tuned our ears to it. So trying to adjust to the American accent. So
Hmm.
I went into a class. I settled in my first semester, but then there was one day where we had a snowstorm. So we
Okay.
had a test on that day as well. So I rushed to my class. I forgot my pencils and eraser back at home. So I went into the class and I borrowed a pencil from somebody to do the multiple choice
Hmm.
questions. And then I had to change some of my answers
Hmm.
finally when I was going to hand over the sheet. So I asked my neighbor, a white, a Caucasian American, I asked him, I said, can I borrow your rubber? I had no idea that the word rubber meant something else in the American dictionary
Yeah.
because our English was Indian and, we had more of a
Yeah.
British influence on our language.
Of course. Yeah.
That's when the person smirked and then I repeated again and then I disturbed the
Hmm.
class and I felt so embarrassed later on when they told me that it was an eraser and it was not a rubber.
Yeah.
After that incident, I felt so embarrassed that I didn't want to show up in the class. I didn't want to
Hmm.
stand up and make my presence because they would probably say, oh, that's the guy that said rubber. So, I mean, people might
Hmm.
say it in jest, but then I know what will come back to me and how I need to react to it.
Yeah.
So that's when it was quite difficult. First 3 months was quite difficult. At that point, I also recalled and replayed because uh, I went to do my bachelor's in a rural engineering college, where I had people
Okay.
from urban cities move in as well, and I had people from rural India who had studied local language. I mean, who had passed their 12th in local language. So I saw that segregation. People didn't mix. There was one set of people who studied in local language who sat in one side of the room, and people who studied in English medium and who came from the urban. The urban and the rural divide was so visible in the classroom. And I felt I was like one of those rural students that day
Hmm.
in the classroom. Then I said, okay, if I were able to help those students measure up and come out of their shell, and to mingle. I said, why don't I do that to myself? Then I went and learned the American vocabulary. I said, what are the words that I should know? What are the words that I should be aware of? What are the American equivalent of British words that is part of my vocabulary? And how do I need to switch? Lift,
Mm.
elevator, apartment, flat. So I identified those words and I said, okay, how can I be more American in my, not just the accent? I didn't care about the accent, but at least can I use the right words so that people could understand me? And
Mm.
how can I learn the metaphors and the slangs to get over my
Mm.
shortfall? So, imposter syndrome has always given me an opportunity to learn more. I've used it that way. It's pushed me out of my comfort zone. And it's also pushed me out of my discomfort zone.
Mm.
Starting there in 97, after that, uh, I have taken a career in marketing communications. For the last 25 years, I'm a marketing communication professional, which means I need to write scripts, speeches, and communications for the CEO. I need to write corporate movies. So I've come a long way from where I started in life. And 2 years ago, I remember I even stood in front of a global audience and I taught a class on inclusive and nonviolent communication. So for me, learning the American slang to actually going in front of a global audience and teaching a course, I mean, so those little efforts that I have taken at my end has actually helped me. So every time when I face an imposter syndrome, like what I told you, I look at the wall. I have a picture of the wall on my phone of all my certificates and achievements. So I look at it for a minute and I'm like, okay, if I can do this, I can definitely do this as well.
Mm.
So how can I break this into smaller tasks? Who's my role model in this space? How
Mm.
have they achieved it? Sometimes there could be a small incident that could have triggered us down the path of the imposter syndrome. But that is like holding a small stone close to our eyes. When you hold a
Mm.
small piece of stone close to your eyes, you can't see the world. But when you throw that stone a little far away, the same mountain in front of your eyes actually looks like something insignificant. So that is where I draw my strengths, saying that, okay, what have I achieved? How can I do this? Break this down into smaller steps. If I feel inadequate, who can help me feel more adequate, feel more confident? Can I speak to an
Mm.
expert? Can I
Mm.
read up a little more on this? And
Mm.
last but not the least, how can I be more prepared? And
Mm.
how can I even celebrate when I break that down into smaller tasks? How can I celebrate those little achievements? So journaling in one way actually helps me. I color code. Anything that I've achieved, I put it in a different color. So there are days when I want to look at it, I feel quite happy.
Mm.
Honestly, a lot of us, when we look at albums and certificates, I even have my report cards from my school. And this morning I went to a wedding and I saw somebody after 25 years. And though they said I've grown a little old with my white beard and all of that, they said, you're still the same warm person that we've seen you as a child. So that resonated so much with me, and I felt quite happy receiving that comment from them. And I came back and I wrote that on my journal, and I put it in quotes, and I even highlighted it so that there could be not so good
Yeah.
days. So I even look at my autograph books, or I mean, your generation calls it slam book. I look at it from time
Slam.
to time. I'm like, oh my God, I still haven't changed. I mean, I'm pretty much the same. I'm just an older version of that.
Mm. Right, sir. Yeah, it was wonderful to know your story, sir. So, sir, I would just want to know that what were the internal thoughts that triggered this feeling of being an imposter when you were in USA? Or in general, what do you think are the self-dialogues that an individual has when he or she feels that they're not adequate enough?
See, that there are limiting beliefs that we have.
Hmm.
Some can be limiting about our own selves, some can be limiting about others around us as well.
Hmm.
Sometimes I've felt I don't know everything, so I'm not qualified.
Hmm.
See, there's always this halo effect. It's called the halo bias. When somebody either comes from a particular background or somebody comes from a particular college, we probably feel inferior sitting next to them. If somebody says they're from Harvard or they're from IIT, right? the moment they make that introduction, right? So rest of us have this bias around them. We create this halo bias around them. And we use that to compare ourselves saying, maybe I'm not as intelligent as them. Maybe I
Hmm.
don't know everything. The moment you start going down that path, you probably feel you're less qualified, you're less human,
Hmm.
and you're probably not even worth it. And many times we don't even want to ask for help. We all think we're Superman, Superwoman, we're super person, that we all can handle everything ourselves. We doubt, what if I ask somebody for help, maybe they would think I'm not qualified enough.
Hmm.
And sometimes we also think success is only real if it comes easily. Because people have conditioned us, people around us have conditioned the society in a certain way that this person's brilliant. And they constantly keep playing that for you in your head, even though they may not be there in front of you. That keeps playing in front of you for often, that you only believe in perfectionism. See, most important imposters believe that unless it is perfect, it's a failure.
Yeah.
Sometimes even my own friend says I have an OCD because I need things to be perfect in a certain way. So
Hmm.
constantly this imposter syndrome shows up in so many other ways. And today we live in a constant comparison culture, right? Those days it wasn't that much. On social media today, everybody wants to live it up. The
Yeah.
moment they post
Hmm.
stories or pictures on Instagram, you constantly use it like a mirror. Even though you're not seeing yourself, you start reflecting on your own life and then you go down that path. Oh, maybe I'm not good enough. And that
Hmm.
is also equally an imposter syndrome that we should be aware of. So I helped myself. I said, instead of saying others are better than me, I started to reassure myself in a different way, saying that I am capable. I need to
Hmm.
work hard if I need to get there.
Hmm.
When I tell myself I don't know how to do this, I say there should be experts out there. How can I reach out to them? How can I learn? How can I put in that hard work?
Hmm.
When somebody gives me a compliment, the other day, I was complimenting somebody and they gave it back to me saying that, hey, all of my success belongs to you. I said, sorry, don't be so generous in handing it down. It's not your will. I said, own it for now. I said, we'll talk about it later. So I work hard and it feels good to be recognized. I tell myself constantly that.
Hmm.
And there are places where I felt, oh, I don't belong here. I felt that in the US as well. The first 6 months, there's so much of a cultural shock that you go through.
Hmm.
Not just the language, but the people around you, the culture, because here we're used to doing everything as a friends gang in college. There, you really can't depend on anybody. You have to be on your own, and you don't have the fallback the same way you had a family here.
Hmm.
So we constantly think, oh, I don't belong here. I'm not good enough. So that way I
Hmm.
tell myself I belong here as much as anybody else because US continues to be a land of immigrants. There's so many
Yeah.
people who've come like me at some other point in time in their life and they've started and that society appreciates hard work. And I started to
Hmm.
believe in myself that I can contribute effectively. Today, if you look at many of the Fortune 100 or even Fortune 500 companies, a lot of them are their CEOs or their leadership team, they're all of Indian origin at some point.
Yeah.
So, especially when you're an immigrant in another land, you have all the more chances of going through that imposter syndrome.
Hmm. Right. So you mentioned that if there is an expert out there or if there's a role model out there, then maybe I can approach the person and try and getting better. So this brings me to the next question: that what is the exact role, according to you, in your view, of mentoring, um, perhaps external validation or supportive groups in overcoming this difficulty which you individuals face?
Let me give you two examples of what happened in my life. I hope I can answer through these examples. Um, I was very much into school culturals. I mean, I was a part of the vocal team. I was a vocalist at that point. So I used to participate in all the school competitions during my 11th and 12th. Not so much in 12th, but predominantly in 11th, I was a part of the cultural team. Almost every event would have my name. I decided to focus so much on culturals, and then I ignored my studies. I flunked in my chemistry, in my quarterly exams and in my half yearly exam. The teacher had two options. Either I could be detained in 11th, they could ask me to repeat 11th grade again, or she could have called my father and had a conversation. The teacher knew exactly why I wasn't doing well. Not that I wasn't capable, but my energies and my focus was elsewhere but the chemistry book. So she called my father and said, "You know what? Your son's brilliant. He does really well in whatever he decides to focus on. He's not done really well in his chemistry in the last two terms. If this continues, we will not be able to promote him."
Yeah.
So I've asked him to stay away from culturals and focus on chemistry. She could have taken another approach as well. She could have branded me as a bad student, and that would have just ruined my career. But she didn't do that. She decided to look at my strengths, and she decided to support me a little bit. She knows that with a little bit of support and a nudge, I could get there. That year, I passed my annual exam with 80% in chemistry. And that was a big belief. And I went on to do my bachelor's in chemistry, chemical engineering, and I also did my master's in chemical engineering. It was unbelievable for me, and I came out with a gold medal and an honors in both. So I went back to my chemistry teacher at some point and I said, "You know what? You actually made my life and you didn't ruin my life, because I gave you a story where many people hate particular subjects because they hate their teachers, or their teachers have said certain things in a certain way." That's where a little bit of mentoring really helped. Another example of mentoring where it helped is I'm going to refer to him here. Dalen Lutzenberger was one of my managers when I worked in Capgemini for a period of 10 years. And that's when I've never had that kind of mentoring. So, Dalen and I vibe at a different level. We have a lot of other common things as well. So Dalen, there was a time when Dalen said, "Chandra, I want you to go out of your comfort zone. I want you to do this, but then I'm going to support you. Use my shoulders, use my access card to open doors for you, but we will have to get this done." That little push and nudge from Dalen, and every week when we had our call, he would say, "Did you socialize this with few other experts and other people? Did you get their opinions?" So the way he pushed me forward made so much more sense, and I could develop a lot more confidence that I did not have in my life until then. I was a senior manager back then. Eventually I became a senior director before I moved out of that organization. From being a manager all the way to being a senior director, there was a huge growth. And if not for Dale, and I continue to do this to others as well, because I don't know how many of them have role models in their lives, but then I want them to have role models which will make a huge, huge difference. Mentoring programs go a long way. Today, I am a mentor for a few people. I constantly call them, check on them, not just giving advices, but then checking on them and letting them know that they've already accomplished a lot in life, breaking those imposter syndrome moments for them. What some other people have done for me, I said, this is my turn to do this for others. And that is my way of saying thank you to my chemistry teacher from my high school and Dalen from my workplace.
Right, sir. Right. Um, so my next question is that are there any cultural influences or gender biases that play a role uh, in a person's life and nudge him to think that, okay, maybe I'm an imposter, and how to cope with this scenario?
It's Let me also bring in Michelle Obama's example. In her book Becoming, she clearly says, you know, she feels like she didn't belong either at Princeton or in politics, despite being a highly accomplished person. So it is so easy. Anybody who comes from a marginalized community, 50 years ago, let's look at the Indian workplace. Were there so many women? Absolutely not. Even a few women who entered the workforce would feel imposter syndrome every day because they would only be surrounded by men. There's very much possible. There are certain professions where predominantly there are women. For men to go operate in that space as well, it is quite difficult. And people can feel, oh, maybe I'm not growing because I'm not a woman. I felt that because if you look at HR and marketing communications, predominantly a lot of women work in these areas.
Yeah.
You don't find a lot of men in these areas.
Yeah.
Men are probably there at the leadership, but then predominantly you will find women. And once in my life, I was even rejected. My promotion was rejected because I wasn't a woman. So I started to believe that. I even jokingly said somebody, I'm not willing to undergo a sex change for this role. I said, I might as well find a job elsewhere. So there is gender that comes into play that pushes you to think that you're not good enough. It happens all the time. Women can give so many examples of what happens in their life. Culturally as well, when you move yourself out of one culture, go to another culture, me living in the US, I felt that. And then, for example, nobody in my family has ever worked for anybody else. They were all in business. And I was the first one to go work for somebody. So, which means I again had that baggage that I had to deal with. Because when I came, I couldn't even look around and say, okay, can anybody mentor me? Can anybody advise me? How do I navigate these crossroads at the workplace? And there was even a feedback that was given to me once, right? One of my managers even used my caste and said, you belong to a certain caste and you people don't even present your work or you don't promote yourself. You don't create that visibility. Despite doing great work, you don't create that visibility for yourself. And that again put me on that imposter syndrome spiral. Then I had to get myself out of it. I said, let me just discount the caste part of it. Maybe I should work on promoting myself a little bit more and creating that visibility, not just in terms of, and let my work speak and also speak up wherever I need to. Because a lot of us become introverts, forced introverts because of this imposter syndrome. We probably think by staying quiet, people will not find out. People only think you're quiet. They will not attribute your silence to feeling like an imposter or a failure. That's why people stay silent. And I'm always drawn towards people who are silent because I go voluntarily speak to them. Be it my own cafeteria, when I find people eating by themselves, I just walk in and I say, you're not allowed to eat by yourself. I said, come and have a conversation. Let's have a conversation. Let's have lunch together. Let's exchange stories. So that way, wherever I can help or wherever they could help me, I mean, I don't have to have a survivor's complex saying that I'm going to help everybody survive. I mean, savior
Yeah.
complex. I don't have to save everybody. That's not me. But at the same time, I'm sure they can help me. They can teach me certain things. So creating that sense of belonging, when Michelle Obama said, I don't feel belong, sometimes it is absence of people of certain color around her. Sometimes culture and cuisine offers so much for you. Every time when I was outside of India, when I smelt Indian food, right, I started to tear up because it connected me back to my culture. Food is so much part of our lives and it connects me back to my culture. So I was able to snap out of those moments because then I know there's some sort of belonging. So wherever I go, I try and create those elements of belonging for me so that I can quickly snap out of that imposter syndrome. That's what I would tell people. Create those moments where you can feel belong and make people feel belong as well. It is not about your own belonging, it is also about making other people feel belong in that space.
True. Right, sir. And how? So while you were just talking about this, I was actually going to ask you that how can someone be empathetic enough to make the other person feel belonged to a particular space? And how can we integrate this into our day-to-day lives?
See, many a time, see, one is unconscious bias. A lot of us have unconscious bias is everywhere. It is like friction. Unconscious bias can work in somebody else's favor. It can also work against them.
Yeah.
For example, you're going to use unconscious bias to think very high of somebody. At the same time, you can use unconscious bias to think some poor of somebody as well. Oh, where do you come from? You come from a particular area, so you can probably have those markers. Oh, people from this area, people from north, people from south. But the moment people say, oh, I come from, I went to school, I went to Harvard, I went to MIT, so immediately you're going to have a positive unconscious bias towards them. Every time
Mm.
your mind tries to make a decision or a judgment, ask yourself this question: is it bias? What
Mm.
data points do I have? When you have positive bias against somebody, that's fine. It's only the
Mm.
negative bias that harms people, and it doesn't create that sense of belonging. So always use this opportunity to create that sense of belonging. What is this person like? Do some little bit of research to find out, give them an opportunity to speak. A
Mm.
lot of people decide to be silent because of either past poor experience that they've had or the trauma. Don't dig
Mm.
deeper, give them, build them that trust. Over a period of time, people will open up and they will start sharing. Share their
Mm.
wins and small victories, celebrate that. When you give that, you actually build a bridge of friendship, and there's an
Mm.
invisible arm that you put out for a handshake. And when
Yeah.
you do that extra mile to say, rather than advising people, ask them, how is it that I can be of help to you? Please let me know if I can
Mm.
do something for you. You don't have to
Right.
sympathize with them, just empathize with them. A lot of us mistake sympathy for empathy. Empathy is just being there, holding their hand, giving them a hug if they're comfortable with consent, and also telling them, I am here. If you need something, let me know.
Right, sir. Right.
Use me as your
Uh,
sounding board. I continue to do this with my ex-colleagues and team members as well. So when they go through rough patches, we continue to be in touch. And if I can do something for them, I'm like, okay, tell me what I can do for you. Can I write you a recommendation? Can I call up somebody? If I see another opening on my LinkedIn, I said, I'm going to call them up and I'm going to put in a word for you. So those are small things that go a long way. Or probably somebody is moving from one culture to another city. And I've also used food as an opportunity to build those equations. I lived in Paris for a period of 3 years. So I am a vegetarian. So it is quite difficult to find vegetarian food where I was working. So I used to bring multiple boxes of food to workplace. And every time I heated the food in the microwave in our cafeteria, people would walk up and, this smells so delicious. What are you eating? And next day I said, you know what? I'm going to bring two boxes instead of one, because another box, I'm just going to leave it there. So whoever would like to try that can heat it up at their own pace and they can try Indian food. And then at the end of 3 years, I actually took all of them to an Indian restaurant for my farewell, and I was able to build amazing sense of belonging, not just for them but for me as well, through food.
right, sir. So, many things we've already covered, and maybe this could be repetitive, but I would just like you to, make some pointers finally that are there some tools, evidence-based tools, which can help us to challenge or navigate through a period when we are facing or experiencing imposter syndrome, maybe journaling or visiting a therapist um, or anything, reaching out to a friend or a mentor. How, if you can just list it down for me.
Absolutely. See, journaling has done wonders for me. Whenever I feel like, that is one way of me clearing up my mind. I tell people I clear the cobwebs in my head by writing. And I've been
Hmm.
blogging for more than 20 years now. And that's how I became a full-time Marcom professional as well. I was able to polish what I write, and constantly I was able to understand and find the purpose of my life. So journaling is a great way. Every time
Hmm.
you have a negative thought or you have a positive thought, you're going to constantly ask, okay, where does this stem from? And
Yeah.
how can how can I turn this in my favor? For example,
Hmm.
I used to even ask my own team members to send me an email, and I used to do this, and it worked wonders for me. At the end of the week, I used to send my manager a report saying, these are the top three highlights of this week.
Hmm.
Rather than just status on various projects that I'm working on, I would say, these are the three highlights, these are the three breakthroughs. Eventually, my own teams started to send that to me. And I was so proud reading each of those, because those are your moments of joy. And
Hmm.
I would take those highlights and I would have an Excel tab on for each of my team members, and I would paste it there. Come appraisal season, rather than looking at the most recent good or bad, I would just look at all the highlights, and I would tell them, here are some pointers that you can use for writing your appraisal this year.
Yeah.
So journaling really helps for you to find out what is bothering, and then you can turn it into something very positive that I've done. Similarly, I've told you I have a wall of achievement in my home. So I constantly keep looking at it just to pep myself up. It's
Hmm.
just like opening a bottle of Gatorade and drinking, because you get that extra energy saying, yes, I can do it. There are days where you feel a little low mentally and physically, but then for you to push yourself that little extra mile, those help. Definitely, there are
Yeah.
people who may need mentors. So don't hesitate to stay away from them. Reach out for help. There's a big difference between a coach, mentor. They're not and therapist. These three people are independent and their roles are very different. A mentor
Hmm.
is somebody who can guide you, who can say, hey, this maybe you can look at it this way. This is what I have experienced. A coach may be hand holding you in certain areas. A mentor may not do that kind of a hand
Hmm.
holding. A coach does that. A therapist is somebody who addresses issues that you have and who may
Hmm.
also give you advice as to overcome. So you
Okay.
can explore those. And there's also something called the um, cognitive behavior therapy. In case you
Okay.
have been through this imposter syndrome spiral for a long time, therapists actually help you identify the issues and help you reframe your thoughts, distorted thoughts in a certain way. That really helps. See, we
Okay.
also have to think of two more things: self love and self compassion. Many a
Yeah.
times when we say love, we always think of somebody else. We don't think of us. So it is about time when we use the word love, we think of ourselves first before we think of somebody else. That is something that I'm learning to do. Then there's also a three-step tool that I use to evaluate myself. Number one is acknowledge. When you have an imposter syndrome feeling or a thought, acknowledge that thought.
Hmm.
I call it the three A's. The next one is assess. Ask yourself, is it real? Is it a fact? Or is it a fear?
Hmm.
Ask yourself that question. Affirm
Okay.
yourself. Last is affirmation. Tell yourself, I'm prepared for this. I've gone through this many times before. I have overcome this, and this is how I did it. If I need to win, I need to fail.
Hmm.
If I need to learn, I need to work harder. Affirmations
Right.
like this have really worked for me.
Right. Right. Uh, Okay, that's a great answer. So, just one last question, because I personally feel that it's important. Sometimes an individual does not realize that when he or she needs to approach a therapist. So maybe he has a mentor, he has a coach, but still things are not working. So, how can an individual identify by himself, herself, that she or he needs to go to a therapist for any problem? In this case, it's like an imposter syndrome problem.
See, this is very much possible. Um, they constantly limit their feeling or their sense of um, individuality. They probably feel, oh, I'm not good enough. I can't apply for
Hmm.
that job. I constantly feel that I'm a failure in life. I feel
Yeah.
depressed looking at my own career. I'm
Hmm.
not confident enough to do anything.
Hmm.
I probably need support in a certain areas. When people have this repetitive feeling, that clearly means it is imposter syndrome. And you're exhausted because somebody has expectations of you and they call you names. For example, oh, that person's a genius. So immediately you have to work harder than anybody else.
To live.
And you have to
Yeah.
outdo yourself in every step. It is not about somebody who's an underachiever. Even overachievers can have this exhaustion.
Hmm.
So if you're going to constantly go through these loops and cycles of feeling terrible about yourself, feeling unachieved, unaccomplished, absolutely poor confidence, that's where you'll have to realize that you definitely need help. And there's nothing wrong in asking for help. That's what is called the super person syndrome. We probably, or it is called the soloist. Those are some of the characteristics of imposters. It's called the soloist, where they're like asking for help may be looked at as failure. Absolutely
Mm.
not. Definitely go ask for help. If people can't help, they would at least put you in touch with the right people who can help you. Today, I don't solve any
Right.
of my life's issues or problems or small tasks without telling people. Yesterday, a friend of mine 2 days ago called up, said, "Hey, I wanted to get an air conditioner. Where do you think I can get one?" So I just dialed up. I had a conversation with another friend. I said, "Where did you buy your air conditioner?" I said, "Give me a place where I can go and see all the models and discuss the technicalities." He put me in touch with somebody who was super good, who gave me a 30-minute session on how to choose air conditioners. And I came much smarter when I walked out of that store. My brain felt air
Mm.
conditioned, really. So don't hesitate to ask for help. That's what
Right,
I
sir.
tell people. Don't hesitate to
Yeah.
ask for help.
Right, sir. Thank you so much, sir. That was it from my side. Is there anything that you would want to add to this conversation, something that I've missed out, something on your mind?
I would like to summarize in the next 2 minutes whatever we've spoken. See,
Right, sir.
imposter syndrome is not something which is incurable. Imposter syndrome is normal. Let's normalize imposter syndrome. It's absolutely normal. It's fine for you to have that feeling. Um, I've used my imposter syndrome to learn more in life. I've used imposter syndrome to make new connections in my life. I've used imposter syndrome to actually build my life through my mentors and coaches. I've used my imposter syndrome to help others. I'm able to relate to more people, create that sense of belonging. I'm sure you can do much more than what I could. At any point, don't stop respecting yourself, don't stop loving yourself. That is more important.
Right, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. It was a real delight talking to you, and there are so many pointers. I've made my notes, and there is so much to reflect on even after we close this conversation. And I would not say that we'll close this conversation. We'll keep the dialogue going about this subject and maybe many more subjects in the coming times. So thank you so much, sir, for your time.
Thank you so much, Nazneen, for this opportunity to reach out to your viewers. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my experiences and my little tips and tricks. I'm sure this conversation will continue. I will continue to follow your pages to hear other experts speak on this and any other topics.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, sir.